Hey, how's it going, everyone? Kid Komodo here, and today I want to talk about the new Mage items for Season 11. So I believe about a week ago that the Season 10 ended. Riot introduced the preseason, changed a lot of the items, got rid of some old items, introduced some new items, and I've been playing pretty regularly since they released that patch and released the changes, and kind of want to go over some of my thoughts from the new items where I think Riot did a good job, where I think maybe there's room for improvement. Maybe some items that aren't quite as good as they seem, or items that are being built because they were being built in season 10. You know, you have a champion that's kind of had the same go-to item set for years, and with all these changes, maybe those items are not as good as they used to be for that specific champion. Now, the first and probably most important thing that I want to cover, because it's going to kind of affect the rest of what I talk about in the video, I want to compare, and let me get it up on screen here. I want to compare Luden's Tempest and Leandri's Anguish. Now, Luden's Echo was a staple item for many mages in the mid lane. It gave you burst, it gave you wave clear, and it was just, I mean, when you're choosing between like Hextech GLP, aka Super Soaker, Seraph's Embrace, and Luden's just it was a jack of all trades, right? You could build Luden's, and it kind of gave you a little bit of everything that you would need in your game, whereas the other two are kind of more focused for like defensive. If it's Seraphs, it's focused on like defensive and scaling, or like the Super Soaker was focused on like CC and like zone control. And so Luden's was kind of just the go-to for a lot of mages, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I think Luden's Tempest is actually a very underwhelming mythic compared to your other options, specifically Leandri's Anguish. And so what I have up here on the screen is a comparison of their damage. And I'm sure some of you have kind of been reading ahead, but this here is what Luden's does. If you have 200 AP, which is pretty easily attainable, relatively early on into the game to get 200 AP, the Luden's Tempest proc has a base damage of 100 with a 15% AP scaling. So that means with 200 AP, you're doing 100 plus 30 for a total of 130 damage on the Luden's proc, which has a 10-second cooldown. So, that's 130 damage to help with either wave clear or your burst combo, whatever it is, versus Leandri's Anguish, also with 200 AP. Now the burn, the damage over time burn from Leandri's Anguish is 15 base damage plus 2.5% of your AP plus 1% of the target's maximum HP. So at the same ability power threshold of 200, you're looking at basically 20 plus 1% of the target's max HP per second. So over the same 10 seconds that you're waiting for your Luden's proc to cool down, you're doing 200 plus 10% of the target's max HP. So from a purely, damage standpoint, Leandri's Anguish is giving you way more damage. The base damage is already higher, right? 200 compared to 130, but you also get the benefit of whatever their max HP is. You're doing 10% of that over 10 seconds. And so the damage difference between Leandri's Anguish and Luden's Tempest is actually huge. Especially, because you're able to keep this up. If you're consistently landing your spells and you're consistently burning them with Leandri's, you're going to get a huge damage benefit over Luden's Tempest. And so I think with mages like Lux was one of the biggest Ludens users in season 10. It helped with her burst, it helped with her wave clear. It felt, the item felt really good to build on Lux in season 10. But I think now that you can get all of these stats, you can get mana, you can get ability haste, you can get all of that from Liandry's, and it does more damage. I think that even on mages like Lux, who were one of the primary users of the old Ludens, you can still go Liandry's. And so another thing I want to bring up here is different sets. And so you'll see here kind of one of the recommended Lux core builds that we go for is Sork Shoes into Liandry's into Horizon Focus. Now, there are benefits to Ludens, and there are definitely still mages that will prefer Ludens, not because of the damage, but because of the movement speed or I guess the wave clear. So for like I have here, like a champion like Victor or Nico, who rely heavily on movement speed and getting abilities off. You could see something like this where you're kind of prioritizing haste to get close to that 40% CDR. It's actually a little bit more difficult to hit that 40 to 45% CDR in season 11 than it was in season 10. You really have to kind of go for it. Before, you were guaranteed 20% from your starting item. You could get another 15% from your runes. That's already 35 plus 10% from your boots. I mean, at level 9, level 9 or 10, you could have, 40 to 45% CDR. And that's not the case anymore. They removed the cap. So, I've gotten my CDR all the way up to 57% on this new season, but it takes a little bit longer to get there. And even getting to 40 or 45% takes longer than it used to. And so for those champions that, Victor, heavily reliant on weaving spells, getting his shield up from his Q, the movement speed, all of that, you really want that haste. Obviously, you're going to want to go Lichbane in here as well, in addition to these items. But Ludens and Cosmic Drive really do have a nice synergy. I'll give it that. With both of them granting you movement speed whenever you deal damage with a spell. Doesn't even have to be against champions. So if you hit a minion or a monster or something with a spell, both of these items are going to give you some movement speed, which feels really nice for these champions specifically. I don't think it's a huge deal, as big of a deal on Lux, right? Which is why I have Lux in this category down here with Liandry's. I think it's okay for Lux to give up on that little bit of extra wave clear from Ludens to take the extra damage from Liandry's Anguish. I also think Liandry's Anguish just has better stats overall. With as powerful as tanks are right now, having the max health burn plus the mythic passive of more ability haste, plus the burn also reducing the magic resist. Now in the tooltip it says a max reduction of 25%. That's actually already been hotfixed. It's only 15%, but if you're adding that on top of your Void Staff, which is 40%, you're looking at 55% reduction in their magic resist, which is pretty substantial. I mean, even if a tank was building full magic resist for whatever reason and ignoring any armor, I mean, you're removing over half of their magic resist, and for as long as tanks are as strong as they are right now, from Sunfire and some of the other items, that having that percent magic resist, or I guess reducing the percent magic resist is pretty strong. So there are a few ways to mitigate. So say you're Lux, and you've decided that you're going Liandry's instead of Ludens because you want to be able to kill tanks a little bit easier, or you just want the extra damage from the passive burn. One of the ways to mitigate one of the ways to mitigate that wave clear that you're losing is through your runes. And so doing something like this, where because Cosmic Insight no longer grants us ability haste, right? So in Season 10, it gave us increased our maximum CDR by 5% and also gave us 5% CDR to our abilities. It no longer does that. So for a champion that's not heavily reliant on summoner spells or isn't going to be using items, you can afford to drop Cosmic Insight. Now, a lot of you would say, well, maybe you drop Cosmic Insight so you can take biscuits, and I think that would be fine. But personally, if I want to go for Leandries, and I know I'm going to be losing some of the wave clear that I used to get from Lumens Tempest, then you can take Minion Dematerializer. And if you use all 3 of your Minion Dematerializers on the caster minions, that's an extra 12% damage to the backline of the minions. And so that more than makes up for whatever damage you were getting from your Ludens, because your E does, a pretty substantial amount of damage. So your E, plus an extra 12% of that damage to the backline of the casters, you're pretty much going to one-shot the caster minions. So even without Ludens, you can still hit that, because that is an important break point to hit for Lux, is being able to one-shot the caster creeps on a minion wave, because her E costs so much mana that you don't want to have to use it twice to clear the casters. And so this is an important rune that would allow you to transition from Ludens to Leandries without giving up your wave clear. You can also spread it out if you're having trouble with melee minions and you want to focus your damage there. You can, it just gives you, it's flexible. Let's see, let's go back to the items. So some of the other things, some of the other sets here, I just kind of want to cover, like certain synergies that I've discovered, or certain combos that I think are strong, depending on the champion, that I just want to cover. So we've already talked about this one. This is an ability haste focused core, where you're getting 30 plus 10 plus 15. So you're looking at 55 plus, if you've taken Transcendence, that's 65. So 65 ability haste is roughly, 35% CDR, which is pretty good. It also has the double synergy for the extra movement speed on both of them. So again, champions like Victor or Nico, or really any other champion that can benefit from, high CDR and movement speed increase. Then you have your, CC one-shot champion. So the reason we want CC here is because that activates our hyper shot. Hyper shot, any champion that has been immobilized will take an additional 10% damage for 6 seconds. So Annie, Lux, and Ahri all have CC abilities that will activate hyper shot without you having to be at that 750 range. With Ahri specifically, her charm also is a damage amp. So hitting the charm is going to activate the damage amplification from charm, as well as the damage amplification from Horizon Focus, meaning that this is a very strong build for Ahri. But again, Lux and Annie also have their own forms of CC that can take advantage of this combo here. Now, for your damage over times, Malzahar, Brand, this core is really, really strong for keeping the target burning forever. With Malzahar's dot, plus Leandries, plus Demonic, I have gotten kills upwards of 10 seconds after I've disengaged the fight, and they will die, way after I've disengaged the fight, just because of the burn. Brand is the same way, especially because of how long Brand's passive lingers, how the way that his R bounces between targets, it can reset that burn and cause it to last for an insane amount of time. So these champions both really benefit from a maximum damage over time build. We're really focusing on synergies with these. So, synergies between abilities and items, synergies between abilities and items here. That's really what we want to focus on. Now here, these two builds are more non-standard, I guess, because Night Harvester and Riftmaker do not give you mana. You have to, maybe not have to, but it feels really bad if you do not start with a tier and eventually build that into Archangel Staff. So the nice thing about Night Harvester, especially on something like Karthus, is you can proc the damage boost per champion, and so at relatively standard AP levels, whether it's 200, 300, 400, somewhere in there, easy AP values to hit throughout the course of a game. Your Night Harvester is doing anywhere from 250 to 350 damage per champion. And so for Karthus, he can press R, get his R damage plus an additional 250 to 350 damage with one cast. So very strong, but you just want to make sure that you're also giving yourself a decent mana pool because you're not getting it from Night Harvester. Same thing for Ahri. This item can be strong on Ahri. Gives you a lot of burst. If you're not really into the whole damage over time Leandries on a champion like Ahri, I definitely understand that. Because Ahri is kind of a hybrid mage assassin, right? You want to get your damage out and kill a target pretty quickly. And so maybe people say, well, Leandries takes too long to do that. That's fine. You can go for Night Harvester plus Archangels. The only thing with that is you're delaying your Horizon Focus in order to complete your Archangels, but it does give you quite a bit of burst just because of how much damage Night Harvester does. Also, the movement speed is nice. It's very similar to Luden's, where you get movement speed for doing damage, and it gives you a little bit of a burst. The only thing is Night Harvester won't proc on minions, and so it doesn't really help with your wave clear. It's really just for killing champions. Riftmaker is very strong for champions that plan to be in combat for an extended period of time. Swain is probably the biggest example of this. This is mostly a mage guide, but Akali is another big user of Riftmaker because she's also a Conqueror champion. Really any champion that builds AP and takes Conqueror is a candidate for Riftmaker. They just synergize very strongly, actually. But for a champion like Swain, again, because Riftmaker does not grant mana, you want to also go for a tier starter item so that you can build into Archangels and get that stacking as soon as possible. The nice thing about Riftmaker plus Conqueror is Conqueror gives so much adaptive force now with the changes in Season 11, and then the Void Corruption passive from Riftmaker turns that into true damage. Plus, you're getting the 15% Omnivamp from Riftmaker plus the 6% Omnivamp from Conqueror. So just a lot of synergy between Riftmaker and Conqueror. I know a lot of people go Electrocute on Swain, which I think is fine. I think Electrocute Swain is strong as well. But for those of you who do like to run Conqueror on Swain or other champions, Riftmaker is definitely a synergistic option there, as long as you're willing to build Archangels. Archangels doesn't feel as good as it did in Season 10 just because of how much it gave you in Season 10. It gave you the 20% CDR, gave you the shield, gave you the mana return when you cast abilities. This one is really just, it gives you mana, it gives you ability power, and that's it. And now it's good at both of those things, but the way that the tier stacks, it's very difficult to fully stack your tier before like 20 minutes because of how the charges work. And unless you're consistently only hitting champions with your stacks, You're usually completing it somewhere within like the 18 to 20 minute mark, somewhere in there, which is a long time. Now, in that time, you're gonna have plenty of time to finish your boots and your Riftmaker or your Night Harvester, and then once you get to that 18 to 20 minute mark, you can complete your Archangels. But yeah, these are what I'd consider more situational builds, I guess, or if you're just kind of wanting to test things out and see how it feels. I would definitely say that these three here are your more standard builds and your more standard combinations. I think that one of the things I wanted to talk about is I think that Riot didn't put enough ability haste in the game for mages specifically. Now, I'm not hugely experienced with tanks or assassins, ADCs. I pretty much play mages, and so that those are really the only new items that I have experience with so far. But for mages specifically, it does feel like there is a lack of ability haste in the game. 10 ability haste on Lumens Tempest, whereas we used to get 20. So 10 ability haste doesn't quite work out to 10% CDR because of how there's a diminishing returns on ability haste. And so you're basically going from season 10, you would build Ludens and you would get 20% CDR immediately. To now you're getting 9% CDR on Ludens. And for a lot of mages specifically, CDR, makes a big difference in kind of what you're able to do as a champion when you start to come online, when you start to be useful. And so, there are champions I don't want to build Cosmic Drive on. Malzahar would be one where Malzahar, it was very common in Season 10 to rush 45% CDR, right? You would go Ionian, you would go Ludens, and you would go like, you could either go Banshees for the double spell shield, or you could go Zanyas for a little bit of protection there and hit your 45% CDR. And that gave you a lot of ability to silence on a short cooldown, dropping a Q and silencing, 3 or 4 people on a pretty short cooldown is powerful in team fights. And you can't do that on Malzahar anymore because one, you're going for Liandry's, which does give 20, but there are really no other core items for Malzahar right now that give that ability haste. Lux is another one because Lux was such a big user of Ludens. You could pretty reliably get that 30, 40% CDR mark just in her normal core build, and that's not the case anymore either. Especially if you were to go Ludens into Horizon Focus, you're giving up even more ability haste than you would go if you went Liandry's. And so mages just feel like they have such long cooldowns in this new season, and it's maybe the trade-off is mages have more damage, and so in order to balance that out, they had to have higher cooldowns, and that's why there's not as much ability haste. And so I'm not sure if it's something that we're going to need to get used to as mage players, is getting used to having longer cooldowns but doing more damage with those cooldowns. Or if it's something that they're going to kind of introduce a little bit more, or they're going to introduce more options for ability haste, in future patches. Obviously, the preseason's been going on for a week, right? And we still have almost 3 months until the new season starts. And so there are going to be plenty of changes between now and then. And so, this could all be a pointless discussion, once season 11 actually starts. But for now, I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts on some of the items. Items that I thought synergize well, items that I think are underwhelming. Again, Lumens Tempest being one of the biggest, underwhelming items in my opinion. Especially for the cost. I mean, to increase the cost 200 like they did. So season 10, Lumens Tempest was 3,200. Now it's 34. and kind of for what you get out of it compared to the other mythics, it's just underwhelming, in my opinion. Certain champions still benefit pretty well from it, like Victor, because of the movement speed. But on champions like Lux or even Xerath and Vel'Koz, I build Liandry's Anguish because the damage output is higher. The stats on Liandry's are more favorable to me personally. And also, it provides insurance against tanks, which, if in season 11, trying to kill a tank when you've built Luden's Tempest feels impossible. I mean, you just don't do any damage with Luden's Tempest to a tank. And so even on traditionally Luden's builders, like I said, like Xerath, like Vel'Koz, like Lux, I found myself building Liandry's just because it feels like a much stronger item from a damage and statistical, outlook. Yeah, those are my thoughts on the new items for preseason heading into season 11. If a lot of stuff changes over the next few months, I may do a new video to kind of update what has been changed. But for now, I just kind of wanted to get my thoughts out there for those of you who come into the stream and are asking me questions about what I think of new items, what I think of builds, what I think of champions. I want to have this resource out there for you to kind of refer to if you're having trouble with what to build on mages in the preseason. Always feel free to ask me questions, whether it's dropping a comment on the video to ask me a question or stopping by the stream. I'm always happy to share whatever knowledge I have, and to answer any questions. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like. If you're new to the channel or if you just haven't had a chance to do it yet, don't forget to subscribe as well. All of these things kind of help the channel grow, reach a bigger audience, and just help grow the community. So appreciate all the support, and good luck in the preseason, guys.